So my background is I was, so my father was 7 when he migrated from Pakistan. Right?
Which
As
part?
part of
Lahore, Multan?
Multan.
Multan.
He was from Multan. And they, as the family came, they settled various places before they finally found the place where I was born, which was Ambala. And my dad joined the Navy. So the reason I was born in Ambala was because my dad was away fighting the 71 war when I was born.
Oh,
And so, I've grown up in these stories of how you fight odds to make your life. My father had 5 siblings. Each one of them had their own stories, and each one of them did remarkably well. But, the one thing about you learn a lot from your parents. Your life gets modeled around what you see, what you observe. And what I found from my parents was this tremendous resilience, right? That when your back is to the wall, you only push forward, right? So my dad's journey, the journey of his brothers, the journey of my mom's family is very similar, right? They all migrated from Pakistan. My mom was, of course, born in India. My dad was born there, and these stories are inculcated in you from the time you're being.
despite
you grow
your
up.
being, you were born in 1971.
I was born in 70. Yes. Right. And so, it started from there. Then my dad was in the Navy, and the forces life creates a certain discipline in you, and it creates a certain adaptability in you. Because, I never had the luxury of being in the same school for more than 2 years. Right? We would change places. We also lived abroad. I studied there for 3 years in Germany, a year in Russia. Right? So forget about just knowing English and Hindi and speaking to people. You were like wherever, and then there was no chance to complain, right? Because the parents brought us up in a manner where they said the biggest skill you will have is adaptability, and they gave us a lot of confidence in every setting. I was never the most brilliant kid, right? I was at best an averager in my school and my college, and but I had the ability to, I would say, my parents gave me the ability to adapt and the confidence, right? And to some extent, they also taught me that you never get unfettered with any situation that you would put into. And many years later, I realized that it came from the 4G ethos, right? Because interestingly, we did a workshop recently in here about 4 years back where we got an ex-US Marine, right, to talk to the company. And that Marine, so I asked him, I said, how do you go through life in the way that you do? And he says, no, the only training that any military person is taught in the world, everywhere in the world, is the same. And that is, you get comfortable by being uncomfortable.
Nice.
Right? So basically, we got comfortable when adapting in terms of doing all of that. And I think somewhere in this life, somewhere in that period, uh, there are these turning moments in your life. You don't know what exactly triggers. Sometimes they're events, sometimes they're this. I think my dial turned during my MBA time, right? And my dial turned because I suddenly realized that everybody who studied, who had grown up with, 4G kids do well, they go to the best colleges, etc. I went to very good colleges, but not the best, right? And I think somewhere my dial turned at that point in time, and I said, no, this life is about constantly fighting a certain battle, right? And so I decided that I'm going to continue to just keep performing and growing as an individual. And so after college, then I got into Eicher, which is where I met Mr. Sachdev. Right? That was my campus job. And then from there to PepsiCo. So when I was an Eicher, I was like, okay, this is a great company, but wood tractor, it's very difficult to, well, a lot of people can link their purpose to it. I found it a little difficult, and frankly, I found it a little slow. And then a call from Pepsi came, and then I moved to Pepsi. And there I was like, yeah, this is too fast, right? That was too slow, this is too fast.
It was Yum or Pepsi?
That was Pepsi. Pepsi is, and I was working in what was called Frito-Lay. But there's an interesting thing that happened there. While the business was very dynamic, it was growing so rock solid and fast. Decisions were made in New York. And for me, and of course, it wasn't culturally. I was more adept with how an Eicher would run its culture than how Pepsi has a great culture, right? But you find yourself in various places, and obviously, I realized it wasn't the best place for me. But I worked there for 4 years, and I learned a tremendous amount from PepsiCo. And then I said, okay, where is the New York, India? Right? And there were two industries at that time where the New York was India. One was comp science, the computers, right? IT. And the other was, at that point in time, pharma.
Correct.
Right. And so IT had done done my computer engineering, and I wasn't very impressed with what I was learning there, and I was okay with it. So I said, okay, why not try pharma? Right. And I happened to work in a really great company. That was Dr. Reddy's. And I worked with them for 13 years. And actually, what I am today is because Dr. Reddy's and the family there, they trusted me in various roles, kept progressing my career. I almost felt as if, this was and somehow in Dr. Reddy's, it's an institution where they believe in creating a partnership between the individual and the company.
Beautiful.
Right? And I think this partnership was such that, they understood what my aspiration was. And the company was progressive. It listed in the New York Stock Exchange. And so all my upbringing, basically in pharma, happened from there. Right? And Dr. Reddy's has a very similar culture to Cipla's, which is about doing good. Right? While being.
So that's my next call also.
Yeah. Oh, is it? You're meeting.
Well, Prasad is one of the.
Yeah. So Prasad was pretty much my career. I owe it to what Prasad did for me. I worked very closely. No, not you're talking about Prasad Menon. I'm talking about G.V. Prasad. Yeah. So Mr. Prasad, G.V. Prasad actually helped me create my career, founding blocks. Gave me a role in his business, his largest business in the US, and I was like, wow, Prasad's making this big bet on me. I hope he knows what he's doing. And it played out well. The promoters and entrepreneurs have their way of figuring out what talent can do.
From what you're telling me, the way that the way you're describing it, I'm not sure how true it is. It's as if there was no, typically if you go to any MNC, the pressure on a monthly, quarterly numbers are phenomenal.
Yeah.
So if you're sent to the United States with an India pharma company, they're going to say, boss, kya hua hai? Kitna budget mein, kitna budget, Did that not seem to happen to you?
No, it did. But I would say it was very refined, because I remember once I had this conversation with Prasad, and see, the ethos is very important here, right? And that's one of the reasons why I made this distinction. Because Prasad would always tell me, he said, look, it takes me 5 years or 8 years to make a drug in my lab and bring it to the market, right? I'm not going to beat you guys up if you can't make, it's the same philosophy. We understand that quarters will come, quarters will go, right? But we are building an institution.
That's a phenomenal thing.
Right? We're not building a company for quarters. Right? So it's this institutional, and I've found, it's quite remarkable. The new age Indian companies, which are trying to create a mark for themselves in the US, globally by the US, they have this thing of how do we create institutions, right? Maybe Pepsi, Coke, they are already institutions in themselves, but maybe this phase of that we want to become an institution was there 30 years or 40 years back for them. You see, and it is now for us, right? So whether it's the Mahindra Group or it's the Reddy's or it's the Cipla or everyone is about how do we institutionalize. He visited Dr. K.A. Hamid, our founder.
He's no longer.
He died quite early. Actually, he was not very old. Then Dr. Hamid, the person who now, Yusuf Hamid, who everybody sees in picture and print and in person, he then took on the mantle of the company from his father. And obviously, this whole thing on self-sufficiency, etc., pretty much, I would say, pretty much influenced the way how he thought, right? And he imagined self-sufficiency to be sufficiency to be this whole thing about making sure that everybody has a choice to live, right? As against a verdict to die,
My God.
right? From a medicine perspective. And so that's why, his whole journey was about making sure that monopolies don't exist. So throughout his life, he fought for the Indian patent laws to be such that don't allow monopolies for multinationals. And that's why he got called a pirate, he got called a warrior by all these multinational companies. And that led to his famous speech at the United Nations, which you should, and he said, when he went there, he said, look, I represent the ambitions of the third world, right? And, I believe there should be no profiteering in matters of life or death. Right, and so that pretty much shaped Cipla.
Beautiful.
From the time that it brought out the first HIV/AIDS drug, which was less than $1, which was again a part of a monopoly.
Yeah, they made a big fuss about that.
Yeah, and then the patent laws in India. That's how Cipla was born. It was born with the intention of doing good while being good. And fast forward a couple of years, many years after it started, etc. When I joined this company, right, I was equally intrigued. I said, everybody else seems to be focusing on markets outside. So Africa is the focus. So, what's the game plan here? So my first meeting with Dr. Hamid here was a very interesting meeting because he said, look, I'll tell you 3 things that I'd like you to run the company as. And, pretty much like a daughter-in-law enters the house, he gave me the keys of the company. He was 78 at that time.
Wow.
So he said, here I would like you to never do the following 3 things. If you make my company the highest in profitability metrics, right, and you come back to me 5 years later, I will say, well done. But I would also ask you, did you lose the soul of what I created? Right? So I don't expect you to be the highest profit-making company. That's not the intention why we formed Cipla. He also said that in our list of stakeholders, the patient comes first, the shareholder does not.
Wow.
Right? So the patient is
That's
the most
an
important.
incredible statement to make.
Yeah. So for us, what we do for the patient is the most important. Right? So that was the.
And your shareholders don't crib about this.
Well, no, because look, if you do well for the patients, your
And
results
you
will
do
follow,
make reasonable
right?
profit.
People have shown that, right? Whether you care for a consumer or you care for a patient, right? This company makes medicines, so we have to understand that.
Correct.
The second thing he said, never do anything for your quarters. I've run this company for several years. Quarters come, quarters go, right? Just keep your attention on what you want to make this company over the several years.
What a phenomenal thing to say.
Yeah, and the third thing was obviously don't do anything stupid that I have to sell the company or close it down. So those were the 3 things that were given to me, which pretty much in a way defines how we operate. In Reddy's, I finished 13 years. And then I had this meeting with Samina, who's the founding family of Cipla. And she said, look, we're going through a transition and, there are multiple transitions underway. There's a promoter transition underway. There's a management transition underway. Would you like to join Cipla? And I said, yeah, but in what role? She said, well, why don't you come as a CFO? Let's make that your landing station. I was like, I have been CFO of Reddy's. After that, I did a market. Why would I do this? And she said, well, we want to work together to create something. And so I joined on the basis of that. Moved my whole family from the US back here. And then in 2015, I joined Cipla. And then that conversation with Dr. Hamid happened. I finally realized, okay, this is about another institution that is going to be built. And I loved it from that point in time.